Marco's secret ingredient. The aroma of baking dough and simmering tomato sauce hung thick in the air, a fragrant fog that clung to everything in Marco's pizzeria. Outside, the Naples sun beat down, but inside, a controlled chaos reigned. Marco, a bear of a man with flour dusting his apron like fresh snow, expertly tossed dough high above his head. The rhythmic slap of the dough against his palms was a familiar, comforting sound, a constant beat in the soundtrack of his life. "Another margarita for table 3, he bellowed, his voice easily cutting through the din. He grinned at a group of tourists, snapping his fingers with a flourish. "The best pizza this side of Vesuvius, I guarantee it." Bella, perched elegantly on a stool behind the gleaming espresso machine, offered a practiced smile. "Marco exaggerates," she said, her voice a silken contrast to his booming pronouncements, "but he does make a very good pizza." She expertly tamped the coffee grounds, her movements precise and economical. Marco winked at a couple holding hands by the counter. "It's not just good, Cara. It's legendary, and it's all thanks to my secret ingredient." He tapped the side of his nose conspiratorially. "Can't tell you what it is, though. Trade secret, you understand?" The couple laughed, charmed by his jovial nature. Bella, however, merely stirred sugar into a cappuccino, her smile fixed, almost strained. Marco's secret ingredient was a source of endless irritation to her. It was always the same show. He'd puff out his chest, boast about his superior pizza, and hint at some magical element that set it apart. Luigi Esposito, Marco's oldest friend and the pizzeria's resident pizza oven maestro, watched the exchange from the corner of his eye. He didn't share Marco's boisterous nature. Quiet and observant, he preferred to let his actions speak for themselves. He knew Marco's secret ingredient was nothing more than good quality tomatoes, fresh basil, and a generous helping of heart. But he also knew that letting Marco have his little performance was part of their unspoken agreement. It kept the customers happy, and it kept Marco. Marco. A particularly loud group of Americans entered, their voices echoing through the small space. Marco, ever the showman, immediately launched into his spiel. "Welcome, welcome. Prepare to taste the best pizza you've ever had. My secret ingredient. Ah, that's a story for another time." Bella's nails tapped a rapid tattoo against the counter. The constant chatter, the heat from the oven, Marco's unending boasting, it all grated on her nerves. She felt stifled, trapped in this small, bustling world. She glanced at the glossy magazines stacked beneath the counter, images of Milanese fashion and Roman villas mocking her current reality. Luigi noticed Bella's tightly drawn expression. He knew she dreamt of a life far removed from the pizzeria, a life filled with designer clothes and luxury cars. He also knew that Marco, bless his heart, was completely oblivious to her simmering discontent. Later, as the lunch rush began to subside, Marco leaned against the counter, wiping his brow with a flour-dusted hand. "Another great day, Bella. The secret ingredient never fails." Bella forced a smile. "It's amazing, Marco. Truly." The word felt like ash in her mouth. "You know," Marco continued, his voice lowered confidentially, "Old Signora Rossi, she swore she could taste a hint of cinnamon." "Cinnamon? Imagine." He chuckled, genuinely amused by the suggestion. Bella's smile tightened. "Cinnamon?" The woman was clearly delusional. "Perhaps," she said coolly, "she was just being polite." Marco didn't notice her lack of enthusiasm. He was already humming a cheerful tune, preparing for the next wave of hungry customers. Luigi, however, caught the flash of something dark and calculating in Bella's eyes. A fleeting glimpse of a discontent that ran deeper than he had ever suspected. He frowned, a knot forming in his stomach. Something wasn't right. A policy of deceit. The cool glow of the laptop screen illuminated Bella's face, painting it in shades of blue and anxious white. Her fingers, usually adorned with bright red nail polish, were bare and gnawed at the cuticles. She scrolled through page after page of life insurance policies, the jargon blurring into a confusing mess. accelerated death benefit, premium, beneficiary. The words swam before her eyes. She pinched the bridge of her nose, a faint headache throbbing behind her temples. Marco was downstairs, humming off-key as he kneaded dough, the scent of yeast and garlic already permeating the small apartment. It was a comforting smell, usually. Tonight, it felt suffocating. She clicked on a link promising instant quotes and easy approval. A form popped up, demanding information. Name, age, occupation, health history. She hesitated over Marco's information. Pizza maker. Healthy as an ox. No pre-existing conditions. It was almost comical. The image of his ruddy face, perpetually dusted with flour, flashed in her mind. He was a good man, a simple man. Too simple. A memory surfaced. Her and Marco, years ago, standing on the rooftop of their building, the city lights twinkling like fallen stars. He'd promised her the world, a life of adventure and excitement. Instead, she got this. A cramped apartment above a laundromat, the constant aroma of stale pizza, and a husband content with making the perfect pepperoni pie. She slammed the laptop shut. Enough. She needed to talk to someone who could explain all this nonsense in plain English. The insurance office smelled of lemon polish and quiet desperation. A woman with a name tag that read Brenda greeted her with a practiced smile. Bella Rossi Bellini, please come in. Brenda's office was a small, sterile space, dominated by a large desk cluttered with brochures and forms. Bella sat in the offered chair, her hands clammy. Brenda launched into a practice spiel about financial security and peace of mind. Bella tuned her out, focusing instead on the framed picture on Brenda's desk. A smiling family, gleaming teeth, perfect suburban bliss. That was what she wanted, not this existence. So, Brenda said, her voice snapping Bella back to attention. What are we looking for today? Life insurance, Bella said, her voice barely a whisper. For my husband. Brenda's smile widened, a little too brightly. Excellent. A very responsible decision. And what amount of coverage were you considering? Bella took a deep breath. She'd rehearsed this. $100,000. Brenda's eyebrows rose slightly, but she quickly recovered. Certainly. And what is Mr. Bellini's occupation? The questions continued, a relentless barrage of details. Age, height, weight, smoking habits, family history. Bella answered them all, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. She felt a strange detachment, as if she were discussing a character in a play, not the man she shared a bed with. Finally, Brenda slid a thick stack of papers across the desk. If you could just initial here, and then sign on the bottom line. Bella picked up the pen, her hand trembling almost imperceptibly. She glanced at the bottom line, at the words beneficiary, Bella Rossi Bellini. A shiver ran down her spine. This was it. There was no turning back. She signed. The pen scratched across the paper, a sound that echoed in the silence of the room. A policy of deceit, a promise of a different future, a secret she would carry alone. The bitter taste. These tomatoes, Marco groaned, clutching his stomach. He pushed his plate away, half a pizza still sitting forlornly. Bella, Cara, I think they were off. A bit too acidic. My insides feel like Vesuvius is rumbling. Bella, who was humming softly as she cleared the table, paused, her brow furrowed with concern. Oh, Marco, amore. Are you sure? I tasted them, and they seemed fine. Maybe you just ate too fast. He shook his head, his face pale under the kitchen's warm light. No. It was the tomatoes. A bad batch, I think. Maybe from old man Vitali's stall this week. Marco was never one to hold a grudge, even against potentially suspect produce vendors. Bella patted his arm, her touch light and fleeting. Poor Marco. I'll make you some chamomile tea. That always settles your stomach. She moved to the cupboard, her movements fluid and practiced. Marco watched her, his eyes filled with a familiar warmth. He loved how Bella cared for him, even over something as trivial as a stomach ache. Later, as Marco lay groaning on the sofa, Bella slipped out into the garden. The moon cast long, skeletal shadows from the olive trees, painting the usually vibrant space in shades of gray. She moved with a quiet purpose, her slippers crunching softly on the gravel path. She stopped at the far corner, where a patch of dark green foliage thrived amidst the herbs and vegetables. The aconite. Bella knelt, her fingers carefully selecting a handful of leaves. She knew just how much to take, enough to make him sick, enough to weaken him, but not enough, yet. Back in the kitchen, the rhythmic thud of the mortar and pestle filled the air. Bella ground the leaves, her face set in a grim mask that was rarely seen. The pungent aroma, sharp and metallic, filled her nostrils. It was a bitter smell, a smell of secrets and ambition. She sprinkled the resulting powder on Marco's nightly pizza, a special request he always made, even when feeling unwell. "Just a little cheese and tomato sauce, Bella. That's all I can manage," he'd said, his voice weak. "Here you go, amore," she said, placing the pizza in front of him with a bright smile. "A little something to settle your stomach." Marco took a bite, his eyes closing in contentment. "Ah, Bella, you always know what I need. You are the best wife a man could ask for." Bella laughed, a high, tinkling sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Eat up, Marco. You need your strength." He ate slowly, savoring each bite, oblivious to the subtle, almost imperceptible bitterness that clung to the cheese. He was too trusting, too eager to believe in Bella's goodness. Later, as Marco tossed and turned in bed, his stomach cramping and his body aching, Bella lay beside him, feigning sleep. The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating her face. She watched him, her expression unreadable. With each pained groan, a tiny flicker of satisfaction sparked within her. It was working. Slowly, surely, her plan was taking root. The bitter taste of aconite was doing its work, paving the way for a future she craved, a future without Marco, but with the promise of a new life. A life overflowing with the luxuries she deserved. Luigi's observation. Luigi found Marco slumped against a stack of flour sacks, his usually ruddy complexion the color of old parchment. "Marco, you all right, my friend?" Marco started blinking rapidly. "Luigi, just tired. A long night." He attempted a smile, but it faltered, revealing the dark circles beneath his eyes. Luigi's brow furrowed. He'd known Marco since they were boys, chasing pigeons in the piazza. Marco was a force of nature, built like an ox, rarely ill. "You look more than tired. You look sick." Marco waved a dismissive hand. "Bella's been making me try new recipes. My stomach's not used to all the fancy ingredients." He chuckled weakly. Luigi didn't laugh. Bella's fancy ingredients usually consisted of truffle oil she bought wholesale and charged double for. He knew Marco's palate. Simple, honest flavors were his preference. "I'll make you a pizza, the real kind. A margarita, just like Mama used to make." Marco perked up slightly. "Now that I can't refuse." Luigi set to work, his movements precise and efficient. He kneaded the dough, its yeasty aroma filling the small kitchen. He layered on San Marzano tomatoes, fresh basil, and creamy mozzarella. He slid the pizza into the wood-fired oven, the flames licking at the edges. While the pizza baked, Luigi poured them each a glass of Chianti. Marco took a tentative sip, wincing. "Everything tastes metallic today." Luigi watched him carefully. "Metallic?" He took a large gulp of his own wine. It tasted fine. The pizza emerged, its crust blistered and golden. Luigi cut a generous slice for Marco, then took one for himself. He chewed slowly, deliberately. The taste was off. Not quite rancid, but definitely not right. There was a subtle, almost undetectable bitterness that lingered on the tongue. "What do you think, Luigi? My secret touch, no?" Marco asked, his eyes hopeful. Luigi swallowed, masking his unease. "It's different, Marco. Not your usual style. Maybe a bit too much oregano." He knew Marco never used oregano on a margarita. It was Bella's influence, no doubt, trying to elevate the classic dish. Marco Saif, Bella insists, says it needs more depth. He ate another slice, forcing it down. Luigi watched him, his suspicion growing. Marco was pale, his appetite diminished, and the pizza tasted wrong. Something was definitely amiss. He finished his slice, his mind racing. "I think I'll take a walk," he said, placing his napkin on the table. "Need to clear my head." Marco nodded, pushing the remaining pizza away. "Enjoy the fresh air." Luigi exited the pizzeria and stepped into the late afternoon sun. He didn't head towards the piazza, as he'd suggested, instead circling around the back of the building. He knew Bella had been tending her herb garden. He found her there, kneeling amongst the rosemary and thyme, a small trowel in her hand. She was humming softly, a serene smile on her face. Luigi paused, hidden behind a trellis of climbing jasmine. He noticed something peculiar. Bella wasn't weeding or pruning. She was carefully burying something small and white near the base of a rose bush. Luigi squinted, trying to make out what it was. It looked like a capsule, or maybe a small packet of powder. Bella finished burying the object, smoothing the soil over the spot. She stood, brushed off her knees, and surveyed her work with satisfaction. The smile remained fixed on her face, a mask of innocent contentment. Luigi retreated silently, his heart pounding. He didn't know what Bella was burying, but he knew, with a chilling certainty, that it had something to do with Marco's declining health and the strange taste of the pizza. He had to find out what she was up to before it was too late. Marco, blinded by his love for Bella, was walking straight into a trap. Luigi had to do something, but what? A deadly bloom. The heavy air, perfumed with honeysuckle, carried an undercurrent of something bitter, vaguely menacing. Luigi knelt, peering at a cluster of unfamiliar foliage tucked among Bella's prized roses. She'd always boasted of her garden, importing rare species from across Italy. This, however, was alien. Its leaves, sharply toothed, almost predatory, framed a solitary, trumpet-shaped bloom of a sickly, contused purple that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the light. He tentatively touched a leaf. A waxy, almost reptilian feel greeted his rough fingertips. A ghost of recognition flickered in his mind, but the memory remained elusive. Straightening, he wiped dirt from his apron. "Bella," he called, his tone edged with urgency. "What is this?" Bella emerged, a practiced Sunniness masking her true feelings. "Luigi, admiring my little Eden? Isn't it enchanting?" She waved a hand toward the flower bed, careful to maintain her distance. "Oh, that. A friend brought it from Sicily. Said it was good fortune, or some such nonsense." Luigi was unconvinced. He knew Bella's obsession with appearances, her devotion to designer labels, and social standing. She wouldn't risk planting something unless she had thoroughly vetted its origins, its very essence. Back in his small apartment above the pizzeria, the familiar fragrance of oregano and basil offered little comfort. He retrieved his well-worn botany books, their pages fragile with age. Marco often joked about his weed encyclopedia, but Luigi understood the potent secrets they held, the fine line separating remedy from ruin. He leafed through illustrations of poisonous flora, his finger tracing familiar outlines. There, Aconitum napellus, monkshood, wolfsbane, nightshade's lethal cousin. A primal alarm surged through him. Monkshood, root, leaf, and blossom saturated with aconitine, a devastating neurotoxin. Even casual contact could induce numbness. Ingestion, paralysis, cardiac arrest, oblivion. A creeping, agonizing demise. He recalled the herbal infusion Bella had been serving Marco nightly, claiming it eased his nerves. He remembered Marco's increasing lassitude, his complaints of muscle pain, dismissed by Bella as the inevitable aches of an aging pizzaiolo, and the insurance policy, the hushed conversations he had overheard at the bank. He erupted from his apartment, the books slapping shut behind him. He found Bella in the garden, deadheading roses, her face an expression of serene self-satisfaction. "Bella," he began, his voice a dangerous rumble. "That plant, the aconitum, you know its nature, don't you?" Her smile hitched, barely perceptibly, before reforming. "Aconitum? Luigi, you're being ridiculous. It's just a pretty blossom. I told you, A friend gifted it to me. A friend who wishes to poison Marco? Luigi pressed, closing the distance between them. The air thrummed with unspoken accusations. Bella's eyes took on a flinty quality, the charming facade fracturing. Don't be absurd. Why would I ever do such a thing? Because you despise him, Bella. You loathe his simple existence, his flower-dusted hands, his pure heart. You crave the money, the independence, the glittering life you imagine you merit. She scoffed, flinging her head back. You're inventing things, Luigi. You always were prone to fantasy. Am I? He indicated the plant. Then enlighten me. Explain why you cultivate one of the world's deadliest species in your garden. Explain the tea you administer to Marco. Explain his escalating weakness, his failing health. His voice faded, the implication hanging like a pall. Bella's carefully constructed composure finally crumbled. He was stifling me, she spat, her voice dripping with poison. He would never amount to anything beyond a common cook. I am entitled to more. Luigi stared, the shock coalescing into cold fury. He had always sensed the dissatisfaction simmering beneath her polished veneer, but he never envisioned such malice. Eradicate it, Bella, he ordered, his voice a low snarl. Remove it now. Si spoisoni Marco. Or I swear, I will alert the authorities myself. Bella's eyes narrowed, calculating. And what will you tell them, Luigi? That I have a decorative plant in my garden? That I offer my husband herbal tea? They will dismiss you outright. They will listen when I inform them of the insurance policy. They will listen when I discuss aconitine. And they will listen when they witness Marco's symptoms. He turned away, the fragrance of honeysuckle now sickeningly sweet. Do not underestimate me, Bella. I may be just a pizza maker, but I know my herbs, and I recognize the scent of a murderer's scheme. The swapped slice. Luigi slid another log into the inferno, the flames licking greedily at the brick ceiling of the oven. He didn't look at Marco, bustling around and bragging about his special dough. Luigi just needed to buy some time. Time to make his own offering. He needed a smaller portion of dough, thinner, less of Marco's signature semolina. It was an insult, really, to Marco's skills. But tonight, insult was survival. He spread a basic tomato sauce, a scattering of mozzarella, a drizzle of olive oil. Nothing fancy. A pizza for a child. Marco was too preoccupied with Bella, admiring her as she sprinkled something onto his masterpiece. Something that smelled faintly of almonds, but with a metallic tang that made Luigi's stomach clench. The cheese pizza was ready quickly. Luigi grabbed a peel, expertly slid it under the pale disc, and with a practiced flourish, retrieved it from the oven. He set on a cooling rack, its simple aroma a stark contrast to the pungent fumes emanating from Marco's creation. Now came the tricky part. Marco was distracted, regaling Bella with a story about a pizza-eating competition he'd won years ago. Luigi moved with the quiet grace of shadow. He waited for Bella to refill Marco's wine glass, the clink of glass on glass providing a brief cover. In one swift motion, he swapped the pizzas. Marco's, now subtly steaming on the rack closer to the garbage bin, Luigi's, taking its place of honor. Marco, Luigi said, his voice low, barely audible above the crackling fire. Taste test, before Bella declares it perfect. Marco puffed out his chest, pleased. Of course, Luigi. Always appreciate your honest opinion. He reached for a slice of the plain cheese, oblivious. Luigi stopped him, his hand hovering over Marco's. No, Marco, not that one. Try this one. He gestured towards the cheese pizza. New mozzarella. See what you think. He kept his eyes fixed on Marco's, willing him to understand the unspoken plea. Marco frowned, but his good nature prevailed. He took a bite of Luigi's pizza. Not bad, Luigi. Simple but good. He swallowed. The mozzarella is different. Lighter. Luigi nodded cartly. Exactly. Lighter. For the next few days, Marco ate the cheese pizza. He complained, of course. Too bland, he'd grumble, pushing the plate away. Where's the zest? The fire? But he ate it nonetheless. Bella, surprisingly, didn't seem to notice the swap, or perhaps she pretended not to. She continued to heap praise on Marco's amazing pizza skills, her eyes gleaming with a strange intensity. By the third day, Marco's color had returned. The persistent nausea that had been plaguing him seemed to have subsided. The dark circles under his eyes faded. He even started whistling again, a tuneless melody that had been absent for weeks. One morning, Marco found Luigi cleaning the oven. "Luigi," he said, slapping him on the back. "That new mozzarella? It's done me good. I feel like a new man." Luigi met his gaze, a flicker of relief washing over his weathered face. "Good, Marco. Very good." He turned back to the oven, the flames dancing in his eyes. He knew this was just a temporary reprieve. Bella wasn't one to give up easily. He had bought Marco some time, but the game was far from over. Detective Rossi's doubts. The flickering neon sign of Rossi's detective agency cast long shadows across Luigi's face as he waited. The damp street smelled of stale beer and regret. He clutched a crumpled paper napkin in his hand, tracing the faded image of a pizza oven with his thumbnail. Finally, the door creaked open and Detective Rossi, a mountain of a man with eyes that had seen too much, gestured him inside. "Luigi, right?" "Esposito." Rossi's voice was a gravelly rumble. Luigi nodded, his throat tight. He hadn't spoken his fears aloud to anyone before. "Detective, it's about Marco and Bella." Rossi leaned back in his creaky chair, the springs groaning under his weight. "Marco Bellini? Makes a damn fine margarita. What's the trouble?" Luigi hesitated. It's Bella. She's not happy, Detective. Not with Marco. Not with the pizzeria. She wants more." He unfolded the napkin, revealing the drawing. "Marco, he's so proud, so trusting. He doesn't see it. But I do. I see the way she looks at him, like he's an obstacle." Rossi's brow furrowed. "Obstacle to what, exactly?" "Unhappiness is hardly a crime, Luigi." She talks about his life insurance policy, Detective. Casually but often. And she's being different. Always on her phone, whispering. Buying things she can't afford. Rossi remained impassive. "And you think she's planning something sinister?" He laced his fingers across his considerable belly. "Marco is a generous man, beloved by all. Bella is a beautiful woman. Perhaps you misinterpret her ambitions." Luigi's shoulders slumped. He'd expected this skepticism. "Maybe, but I had to say something. Marco's like a brother to me." Rossi sighed. "All right, Luigi. I'll talk to them. See what's what. But don't get your hopes up. Marital discontent is hardly my bread and butter." The next day, Rossi strolled into Bellini's pizzeria, the aroma of oregano and bubbling cheese hitting him like a warm embrace. Marco, flour dusting his apron, greeted him with a booming laugh. "Detective Rossi, what brings you in?" "Pizza on the house." Marco launched into a detailed explanation of his new dough recipe, his enthusiasm infectious. Rossi listened patiently, observing Bella as she meticulously arranged basil leaves on a pizza, her expression cool and detached. "Bella," Rossi said, his voice cutting through Marco's monologue. "Luigi Esposito came to see me. Said you might be unhappy." Bella's perfect smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Luigi? Always the worrywart. Marco works so hard, Detective. I just want him to have the best. Maybe I push him a little too much, but it's out of love." She placed a manicured hand on Marco's arm, her nails painted a vibrant, almost aggressive red. "Marco Chekhov. Bella just wants me to retire to a villa in Tuscany. A good wife, Detective." Rossi's gaze lingered on Bella's hand. "And the life insurance policy? A villa doesn't come cheap." Bella's eyes flashed. "We all need a plan for the future, Detective, especially in these uncertain times." Later, back in his office, Rossi pulled up Luigi Esposito's file. A clean record, a few parking tickets, nothing of note. He cross-referenced Luigi with Marco and Bella. They lived in the same building. He pulled out Bella's details. A recent online search of undetectable poisons. Rossi stared at the screen, the neon sign outside buzzing softly. Doubt gnawed at him. Luigi's suspicions felt flimsy, built on intuition and perceived slights. But the search history, that was a different story. It was a small thread, but it was a thread nonetheless. And Rossi, after all these years, knew that sometimes the smallest thread could unravel the darkest secrets, unveiling the truth. The musty scent of old paper filled Detective Rossi's small office as he sifted through Marco's financial records. Credit card statements, bank statements, nothing out of the ordinary. Then, tucked behind a stack of pizza delivery flyers, he found it. A pristine life insurance policy, dated just 6 months prior. Beneficiary, Isabella Rossi Bellini. Amount, $100. Rossi felt a familiar tightening in his chest. It was always about the money. He pulled up Bella's digital footprint next. A subpoena had granted him access to her laptop's browsing history. Page after page of fashion blogs and online shopping sites blurred before his eyes. Then, nestled between links to designer handbags and Italian villas, a disturbing pattern emerged. Symptoms of thallium poisoning. How to make someone sick. Untraceable poisons. The hair on Rossi's arm stood on end. He printed the pages, the printer whirring a grim counterpoint to the silence of the office. The search warrant was executed at dawn. Uniformed officers swarmed the Bellini house, their presence a stark intrusion into the quiet suburban morning. Bella, still in her silk pajamas, watched with wide, frightened eyes as they methodically searched every room. Rossi focused on the kitchen. He ran a gloved hand along the spice rack, his fingers pausing on a small, unlabeled jar tucked at the back. He opened it, a fine white powder dusting his glove. He carefully sealed the jar in an evidence bag. Next, he moved to the garden. The officers dug carefully around Bella's prize-winning roses, unearthing a small, discarded vial hidden beneath the soil. The contents were sent to the lab, but Rossi already knew. News of the raid spread quickly through the small town. By lunchtime, the pizzeria was deserted except for Marco, numbly kneading dough. He kept replaying his last conversation with Bella, searching for a clue, a hint of malice in her voice, but finding nothing but the usual complaints about their cramped apartment and his long hours. A police car idled outside. Marco watched, a knot forming in his stomach, as Bella was escorted inside. Her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously around the empty pizzeria. "Marco," she began, her voice trembling. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." He slammed his fist on the counter, the sound echoing in the silence. "Misunderstanding? They found poison in our garden, Bella. Poison." She flinched, her carefully constructed facade cracking. "Marco, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you were planning to get rid of me." He gestured wildly at the empty tables, the flour-dusted floor. "All this is my life, Bella. And you were going to take it away from me? For what? A bigger house? More clothes?" Tears streamed down her face. "It wasn't like that, Marco. I just wanted more. You deserve more, too. More? More than what we have. Than love? Than family? You wanted more than me, Bella. That's the truth, isn't it?" His voice was raw with hurt and disbelief. She didn't answer. The silence hung heavy between them, thick with betrayal. Marco stared at her, his heart breaking with each passing second. He saw not the woman he loved, but a stranger, driven by greed and ambition. The smell of yeast and oregano, once comforting and familiar, now felt suffocating, a reminder of the life he thought he had, the life that was now shattered beyond repair. Justice served, pizza restored. The interrogation room felt colder than the walk-in freezer at the pizzeria. Bella sat across from Detective Rossi, her manicured hands clasped tightly in her lap. The charade had crumbled. The perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the tremor in her lower lip. "It was an accident," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean to." Detective Rossi leaned forward, his expression implacable. "Bella, we have the lab results." The thallium was present in Marco's food, consistently, over a period of weeks. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. Tears streamed down Bella's face, smearing her mascara. "He wouldn't listen to me. I wanted a better life. A life of nice things, not flour dust and tomato sauce. He was happy with that. I deserve more." The words tumbled out, a torrent of resentment and entitlement. She confessed to researching poisons online, to carefully measuring out small doses of thallium and slipping it into Marco's meals. She admitted to the insurance policy, her voice rising in a hysterical crescendo. I thought he'd just get sick. A little sick. Not this. Detective Rossi signaled to the officers waiting outside. Handcuffs clicked around Bella's wrists. As they led her away, she turned back, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. Marco, tell him I didn't mean it to go this far. The pizzeria had been closed for weeks, the ovens cold and silent. The closed sign hung crookedly in the window, a sad testament to Luigi's absence and Marco's despair. But today, the sign was gone. The aroma of baking bread and simmering tomato filled the air once more. Marco, his face drawn but resolute, stood behind the counter. He'd spent the last few weeks grappling with the truth, with Bella's betrayal, with Luigi's death. The pain was still raw, a gaping wound in his heart, but he knew Luigi wouldn't want him to give up. He wouldn't want the pizzeria to die. He'd repainted the walls a brighter shade of ochre, hung new checkered tablecloths, and framed a picture of Luigi above the pizza oven. A simple plaque beneath it read, Luigi's Legacy, Pizza Made with Love. The first customers trickled in, neighbors and regulars who had missed the warmth and the aroma of Marco's pizza. They offered words of comfort, of support, of disbelief at what had happened. Marco forced a smile, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Grazie, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Grazie for everything. We're going to keep Luigi's spirit alive. That night, as the last customer left and Marco locked the door, he stood for a moment in the dim light, gazing at Luigi's picture. He whispered, I won't let her win, Luigi. I promise you, I won't let her win. Bella sat on a cot in a stark, gray cell. The only light came from a small, barred window high above. The sounds of the prison echoed around her, the clanging of metal, the shouts of inmates, the distant sobs. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. The expensive perfume was replaced by the sterile scent of disinfectant. The freedom she craved was now a distant memory, locked away behind bars. She thought of Marco, of the life she had destroyed, a life that, in its simplicity, had held a genuine happiness she would never know. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, a tear not of remorse, but of bitter regret for her own shattered dreams. The pizza and the life she'd scorned had represented a love she'd been incapable of appreciating. Now, the only thing she could taste was the ash of what she'd destroyed.